The valley did not fall silent after Eric's sacrifice. It changed. The fractured crystal beneath his feet pulsed like veins awakening, light spreading outward until the mountains themselves seemed alive. Above, the dragon and griffin circled in tandem. Where once their roars had meant judgment, now their cries shook the air with a strange harmony. They were no longer executioners. They were witnesses, and witnesses were never alone. On the horizon, as if stirred by unseen command, more titans emerged. Shadows vast enough to drown entire cities shifted in the twilight haze. Shapes too immense to measure. Wings of stone, bodies like oceans, eyes like burning stars. They moved closer, drawn by the act that had broken the silence of millennia. The griffin's voice echoed across the plain. The human has bled freely. The covenant is sealed. The first bond is forged. The dragon's fire spiraled upward, not as a weapon, but as a beacon. It pierced clouds, a pillar of flame that could be seen far beyond this world. Eric's AI stammered warnings in his ear. Signal spike detected. Unknown transmissions scattering across stellar bands. This is not local, it's interstellar. Eric, they've announced us. The soldier staggered, gripping his reforged blade. His sacrifice still burned inside him, scar blazing like a brand. The dragon's flame had healed the wound, but it had not erased the cost. His body carried the proof, and in that moment he understood. The Titans had not just accepted him. They had broadcasted humanity's existence. The beacon was not a secret ceremony. It was a declaration. Somewhere beyond the stars, civilizations were listening. Some would hear the call with curiosity, others with fear, and some with hatred. Eric looked up at the sky where the beacon flared. The trial on this world had ended, but the war for humanity's place among Titans had only just begun. The beacon's light still burned in the heavens when the sky split open. At first, it seemed like the auroras of Earth, shimmering veils of color, bending across the firmament. But these were not natural. They moved with intent. They swirled in perfect symmetry, folding into themselves until a wound in the sky was laid bare. And through that wound came ships. They were unlike anything Eric had seen. No sleek, earthborn hulls or steel plating. These were obsidian crescents, elongated forms that seemed to drink the light around them. Their surfaces shifted like liquid glass, impossible to measure, impossible to track. The AI in his helm whispered, voice tight with alarm. Eric, their drive signatures are void-born. These are not local constructs. They came through a fold space gate. The griffin bowed its head. The dragon stilled its wings. Titans, forces that could level mountains with a breath, now stood in reverence. The ships descended in silence, settling above the valley. No thrusters, no heat bloom, no sonic disruption. Only stillness. And then they appeared. Figures descended from the dark vessels. They did not walk, they floated, cloaked in fabrics that shimmered like starlight, their faces hidden behind masks of silver. They bore no weapons, but their presence carried a weight heavier than any blade. Eric's hand tightened on his sword hilt. He could feel it in his bones. This was not a war party. This was judgment. The lead envoy raised a hand. Its voice was not sound, but resonance, a vibration that struck straight through Eric's chest. Human, the flame of Titans marks you, but the council does not know your kind. We have come to weigh the truth of your existence. Speak and let silence judge. Eric's throat tightened. A soldier, he had prepared for battle, for fire and steel. But this, the demand to justify humanity's place in the galaxy with words, not weapons, felt like a battlefield more dangerous than any he had faced. The griffin's golden eyes locked onto him. The dragon's fire simmered low. The Titans would not intervene. This was not their trial. It was his, and the silence that followed was endless, pressing, suffocating. The fate of Earth now rested on the words Eric chose next. The silence pressed closer, heavier than the mountains around him. Eric could hear his own heartbeat echo inside the helm, ragged and uneven. The envoy's silver mask tilted ever so slightly, waiting. The command still vibrated through his bones. Speak. Eric tightened his grip on the blade, then forced himself to lower it. A weapon meant Nothing here. Words were his only defense. Humanity is not a shadow, he said, voice carrying across the dead valley. We fight. We build. We survive. And when the fire falls, we don't bow, we endure. The envoy's head shifted. From beneath its robe, a second voice whispered, mocking. Endure? Like prey endures the predator's teeth? Is that all you are, prey with louder cries? Eric's jaw clenched. His vision narrowed. He felt the memory of every battlefield, every scar. The weight of soldiers who never came home. The weight of his people clawing for survival under skies that rained ash. No, he spat. We are not prey. We are the ones who hunt back. The other envoys stirred. Their robes rippled, as if disturbed by unseen winds. For the first time, the griffin shifted its wings, approving. The dragon's eyes burned brighter. But the lead envoy raised a hand, and the air fell still again. Words are wind. Conviction is fire. You speak of survival, but all vermin claim the same. Humanity has not been measured against the weight of truth. Will you bear it? The ground trembled. From the broken crystal floor rose a sphere of black light, pulsing, dripping shadows that devoured the air around it. Eric staggered backward. The thing radiated pure annihilation. The envoy's voice struck him again. Step forward, human. Touch it. If your species carries worth, the flame will not consume you. If not, the envoy did not finish. It didn't need to. The griffin bowed its head. The dragon's jaws snapped once in anticipation. Even titans feared the judgment flame. Eric's breath came hard. Every instinct screamed to run. But he took one step forward. Then another. The black sphere pulsed like a heart. Each beat cracking the crystal ground beneath Eric's boots. Every step closer was like walking into a storm of knives. Air ripping at his lungs. Bones humming with pain. Behind him, the envoy's whisper wrapped around the silence. Touch it, human. If you falter, your people are dust. The griffin's feathers bristled with static. The dragon lowered its head, molten eyes fixed on him. The titans on the horizon stirred, as if leaning closer to watch. Eric stretched out a hand. His skin burned before he even touched it, veins glowing faintly blue as the sphere's energy reached for him. He clenched his jaw, refusing to pull back. For Earth, for every fallen name. The moment his palm met the sphere, the world split open. A scream tore through the valley, not from him, but from the flame itself. Black fire coiled around his arm, racing into his chest, his skull. His knees buckled. Agony poured through him, sharp and endless. And then voices. Millions all at once. Children crying in bunkers. Soldiers laughing before the charge. Mothers whispering promises they couldn't keep. Scientists, builders, rebels, dreamers. Humanity's chorus, raw and unfiltered, poured into the fire. The envoy staggered back a step. The griffin roared. The dragon raised its head high, because the flame did not consume him. It screamed with him. Eric stood, shaking, black fire wreathing his frame but not devouring. Instead, it reshaped, streaks of crimson bursting through the void. The flame turned from death to defiance, echoing the unyielding will of his species. The envoy hissed. Impossible. No vermin carries fire of its own. Eric's voice cracked, but carried like thunder. Humanity isn't just survival. We are the weight you never measured, the fire you never expected. The crystal valley blazed with his light. Even the titans shifted uneasily. Their gazes sharper now, no longer dismissive, but curious. The envoy lowered its hand slowly, the silver mask tilting. For the first time, its voice held something new. Not command, not contempt, recognition. The crystal valley dimmed as the flame recoiled back into the sphere, leaving only flickers of black crimson fire dancing along Eric's skin. He swayed but did not fall. The envoy stepped forward, its silver mask reflecting his light. So it is true. Your kind carries its own resonance. Not borrowed, not stolen, born. Its tone was not insult, but unease. Above, the griffin gave a sharp cry, wings snapping wide. The dragon's chest rumbled, a sound like a volcano waiting to erupt. And across the horizon, the titans moved. One lifted its arm, a mountain-sized gesture, pointing toward the valley. Another's glowing eyes narrowed. Their rumble shook the shattered land like an earthquake. Eric barely managed to keep his voice steady. What happens now? The envoy tilted its head. Now the council will decide if your fire is to be kindled or extinguished. Lightning split the sky, and in that instant, the air itself folded. From the horizon, shadows detached. 6 more envoys appeared, each cloaked in a different light. Gold, azure, obsidian, jade, white, and blood red. Their masks were carved differently, jagged, smooth, serrated. But every gaze locked on Eric. The silver envoy bowed its head slightly toward them. The human has taken the trial flame and lived. A ripple passed between the gathered envoys. The jade one's voice hissed like leaves torn in a storm. Blasphemy. A lesser being holding sacred fire? The balance will shatter. The blood-red envoy leaned forward, its mask shaped like fangs. Then we shatter it now, burn him and his species with him. Eric's chest tightened. He could still feel the fire inside him, but it was barely controlled, each heartbeat threatening to split him apart. Yet he stood his ground. The griffin moved first, slamming its talons into the crystal, a sound like bells breaking. Its wings rose wide, shielding him. The dragon followed, lowering its massive head beside Eric. Its voice shook the bones of the world. Enough. The human has answered flame with flame. He has earned witness. For the first time, Eric realized the beasts of legend were not beasts at all. They were voices in the council. Allies, perhaps. The obsidian envoy's mask glowed faintly. Its voice was slow, heavy, like glaciers grinding. If he is recognized, then Earth must enter the great ledger, and the other races will not allow it. The silver envoy turned toward Eric, words colder than steel. You asked what happens now? Now, human, your people will be weighed not by survival, but by war. The fire inside him flared violently, and with it came a truth that made his breath catch. This was no recognition. It was a summons to a battlefield far larger than Earth. The council had not spoken its verdict, but the sky did. The titans shifted, their shadows trembling across the broken valley. The air thickened, as though every breath was pulled through iron. And then the stars themselves moved. A black rift tore open above, jagged and raw, bleeding violet light. Ships poured out, not like the elegant envoy constructs, nor the beastly guardians. These were war engines, spiked, angular, alive with crimson flame. Their hulls pulsed like muscle, and their weapons shrieked as they charged. The silver envoy stiffened. The obsidian envoy's glow pulsed low and grim. They come to erase the infection before it spreads. Eric's heart pounded. Infection? You mean us? The blood-red envoy hissed, almost pleased. Justice arrives. The griffin spread its wings, a thunderclap echoing across the valley. No slaughter. The first beam fell, a streak of violet fire that carved through a distant ridge, shattering it into molten glass. The shockwave nearly knocked Eric to the ground. The dragon roared, flames streaming from its jaws, colliding mid-air with the invader's weapons. Explosions split the sky, burning shards raining down like meteors. Eric staggered forward, his voice raw. They're not here for me. They're here for all of us. The silver envoy glanced at him, unreadable behind its mask. Human, you stand in a war you do not understand. Eric clenched his fists, feeling the inner fire ripple. Then explain later. Right now we fight. The griffin bent low, its massive golden eye fixing on him. For the first time, Eric felt not just recognition, but an invitation. Climb. His hands shook as he gripped its feathered mane, pulling himself onto its back. The heat of the beast's body thrummed through him, in sync with the fire inside his veins. The griffin rose, wings beating storms into existence, lifting him toward the oncoming fleet. The Katheri ships adjusted instantly, their weapons locking on the lone human riding a myth. The dragon surged upward alongside them, its wings eclipsing the stars. Fire and lightning carved the heavens. The valley below erupted in chaos. Envoys summoning barriers, titans stirring uneasily. The ground itself breaking under the weight of forces not meant for mortal eyes. But Eric's focus narrowed. For the first time since this began, he felt clarity. He wasn't chosen by mistake. He wasn't surviving by chance. Humanity had been noticed, and now humanity would answer. The first salvo screamed toward him. The griffin dove, dragon flame burned it to ash, and Eric's fire surged from his hands, a blazing arc that ripped through the dark sky. The beam struck the nearest Cathari ship, splitting its living hull open. The invaders recoiled. The council went silent, and for the first time in eons, the universe witnessed it. A human's fire cutting down the stars. The wreck of the first Cathari ship burned as it fell, a screaming comet crashing into the far valley. Eric's fire still crackled in the air, painting the battlefield in human defiance. But the victory was short. The remaining fleet halted in eerie silence, their weapons dimming. Instead of retreating, the hulls began to split open, not from damage, but by design. The ships shed their armor like husks. Beneath the metal, something writhed. Creatures, tall, many-limbed beings, their flesh shimmering with violet veins, their eyes black voids that swallowed light. They moved like liquid given shape, oozing from the ships in hundreds, then thousands, pouring into the sky and down toward the valley. The dragon recoiled, flames sputtering. The griffin screeched, wings trembling. Even the ancient titans stirred uneasily, their massive forms shifting in the distance. The silver envoy's voice trembled for the first time. They brought the Shroudborn. Eric felt his stomach twist. These weren't soldiers. These weren't machines. These were weapons. Living nightmares designed for one purpose: to smother light, to consume resistance. The Shroudborn did not fly. They flowed. Every movement bent the air around them, warping the world into shadows. Where they touched the earth, the ground blackened, grass withering into ash. One landed close. Eric's fire flickered. He expected flesh. He found absence. His flames licked over its body, but sank, like light into tar. The creature opened its mouth not to scream, but to draw his fire in. It fed. Eric staggered back, panic spiking. His power, his one gift, was being eaten. The griffin clawed at the creature, tearing through it with talons sharper than steel. But the wound sealed instantly, violet veins stitching back together. The blood-red envoy's glow pulsed, grim. Now you understand. Fire alone will not save you. Eric's chest burned. Then what will? The obsidian envoy tilted its head. Not your fire, your will. The dragon roared again, unleashing an inferno. The sky blazed, dozens of Shroudborn burned into vapor. But for every one destroyed, 10 more emerged from the ships above. The war had shifted. This wasn't a test anymore. It was extermination. Eric clenched the griffin's mane tighter, forcing himself to breathe, forcing himself to stand. His flame wavered, but deep inside, the fire wasn't dying. It was waiting for him to stop fearing what he couldn't destroy. Because fire wasn't meant to erase shadows. It was meant to light the way. The Shroudborn poured across the valley like a tide of nightmares. Every strike, every claw, every flame only bought moments before their endless swarm closed the gap again. The griffin bled from its wings. The dragon, though mighty, began to falter under the weight of shadows clinging to its scales. Eric's fire grew weaker, siphoned by the creatures that drank light like water. The ground shook. At first, Eric thought it was the swarm, but then he felt it. Deeper, older, a heartbeat, not his, not theirs, something far beneath the stone. The silver envoy's voice trembled. The titan stir. From the distant ridgelines, colossal silhouettes shifted. Mountains moved. Valleys rose. The horizon itself seemed to breathe. Slowly, impossibly, a massive stone arm tore free of the earth, scattering forests like grass. A titan stood. Its body was carved from continents, veins of crystal pulsing with inner light. Its eyes burned like twin suns as it turned toward the valley. The swarm faltered for the first time. Even the Shroudborn recoiled at the sight. The blood-red envoy's glow deepened. You've woken them, human. Do not let them fall back to sleep. Eric's chest flared with heat, not pain, recognition. His fire leapt higher, refusing to be swallowed. He wasn't just burning. He was calling. The Titan's gaze fixed on him. And for an instant, Eric felt it. like standing before an ocean that could crush or cradle him. The Titan wasn't here to save him. It was waiting for proof. The griffin roared defiance. The dragon spat flame at the swarm. But both two turned their eyes toward Eric, as if he were the missing piece in this ancient chain. His fire expanded, not outward, but upward. It stretched into the sky, a pillar of flame piercing the clouds, visible for worlds. The Titan raised its hand. Stone fingers curled, echoing his flame with a surge of light that made the shroud-born shriek in agony. For the first time, the swarm bled shadows that did not heal. Eric's heart pounded. They're not waiting for gods, they're waiting for us. The silver envoy whispered, barely audible over the quake of mountains. And so begins recognition. The Titan took its first step toward the valley, every motion rewriting the battlefield. The earth cracked, rivers boiled, the sky split. The shroud-born swarmed in greater desperation, but the balance had shifted. Human fire had become Titan flame. The valley had become a war between two eternities, shadow without end and stone older than stars. The Titan's every step tore the land apart. Yet with each strike against the shroud-born, a terrible truth revealed itself. Its power was not infinite. The light flared brighter only when Eric's flame burned stronger. The Titan was not fighting alone. It was feeding on him. The silver envoy leaned close, her voice a tremor. They recognize you, human, but recognition is never free. Eric staggered, flames licking from his chest, his eyes seared with visions not his own. He saw humanity across ages, hunters with fire in caves, sailors lighting beacons on stormy coasts, rebels igniting torches against tyranny. Always flame, always sacrifice, always human. The Titan's gaze bore down on him. No words, only hunger, a demand older than language. The blood-red envoys glowed darkened to black. They do not ask for your fire alone. They ask for your life, your will, your sacrifice. Eric's breath caught. My life for theirs? The griffin screeched in fury, slashing shadow apart. But its wounds no longer healed. The dragon collapsed to one knee, fire sputtering. Both beasts looked at him, not as prey, not as pawn, but as if they knew this moment was his to bear. The Titan's hand lowered, palm open, vast enough to hold the entire valley. Its meaning was unmistakable. Give yourself, or let the fire die. The envoy's words became sharp, desperate. Human, you must choose. Burn brighter than any before you, or let them all fall. Eric looked at the griffin's torn wings, the dragon's broken scales, the soldiers who had fought, bled, and died just to reach this impossible place. He looked at his own hands, trembling, fire crawling up his veins like chains of light. And he understood. The fire was never a weapon. It was a bond. His strength had always come from giving, protecting, caring, igniting others when they had nothing left. He clenched his fists, then spread his arms wide, flame erupting from his chest in a storm. His voice thundered with it. Then take me, but let my fire burn through them all. The Titan's palm closed around him. For a heartbeat, he felt crushed beneath continents, drowned in light, swallowed by an ancient will far beyond human comprehension. And then the valley exploded. A wave of flame surged outward, not destroying but transforming. Every soldier's blade ignited. The griffin's wings blazed anew. The dragon's roar became molten fire. Even the very sky caught light, a dawn tearing through shadow. The shroud-born screamed, not in rage but in terror. For the first time since time began, they fled. But Eric did not feel triumph. His fire burned brighter than ever, but it was no longer his alone. He was becoming something else, something vast, something Titan. The envoy whispered, almost mournful, "You gave them more than they asked. Now they will never let you go." The firestorm faded slowly, like an ocean of light retreating into silence. When the ash cleared, the valley was no longer a battlefield. The shattered cliffs had become glass. The rivers turned molten gold. No trace of the shroud-born remained. The world had been burned clean. At the center stood Eric, but he was not the same man who had stepped into the Titan's shadow. His body glowed faintly, veins burning like molten cracks in stone. His eyes were no longer just human. They mirrored the Titan's vast, star-forged gaze. Every movement carried the weight of something ancient. The griffin landed beside him, lowering its head. The dragon bowed, one ruined wing. Not in pity, not in command, in recognition. The envoy approached, her silver form trembling. You are no longer only yourself. The fire is bound to you and you are bound to them. Eric tried to speak, but his voice carried more than words. It was layered with echoes of thunder, stone, and flame. They gave me their power, but what do I give back? Silence followed. No envoy, no beast, no soldier answered, because they all knew the truth. The fire had claimed him. One of his comrades, Jorin, bloodied, shaking, eyes wide with awe and fear, stepped forward. Eric, is it still you? For a heartbeat, Eric faltered. His hands shook, fire trembling at the edges of his skin. He looked at his friend, at the men and women who had fought to reach this impossible moment. He forced a smile, weak, human real. For now, the Titan's shadow flickered in the sky, not solid, but lingering, as if marking him. A reminder, a promise. Eric turned his gaze upward, voice steady despite the fire roaring inside him. If they think I'll burn myself away for them, they're wrong. I am human, and humanity doesn't kneel. We rise. The griffin shrieked in approval. The dragon's fire flared once more. Soldiers raised their blades, their cheers echoing across the scorched valley. But deep within, Eric felt the truth. The fire would not be denied forever. Every use of it drew him closer to something beyond humanity. And when the Titans called again, he would have to answer. Fire, end of chapter 2. Hook for chapter 3. Eric has saved the valley, but at the cost of binding himself to the Titan's fire. Now all of humanity must face the consequences of being recognized. Not as prey, not as allies, but as a force the Titans will never ignore again.